I am Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero. I asked Michael Harris to join me once again on the show. Michael, as you may remember, is a public defender in the state of Texas. He was the Libertarian candidate for Attorney General in 2018, and he studied under Murray Rothbard. I wanted Michael to come on and talk to us about the Texas v. Pennsylvania case and the legal troubles of Ken Paxton and, possible reasons why he would have filed these cases knowing that there was little to nothing there. Michael was gracious with his time, and he wanted me to make sure y'all know, and I think he states it in the interview as well, that he was an opponent of Ken Paxton in 2018. And so if you think that colors his view, then you're allowed to think that colors his view. But I know Michael to be an honest man, and I thought it would be an interesting conversation. It was Monday, and like all Mondays, it came with a slew of problems. So there are some technical difficulties, some sound issues, all sorts of different shit going on. And the interview ends pretty abruptly at the end, but I think there is enough here where you get the idea. So, without further ado. All right, Michael, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing good. It's 2020, and as REM said, it's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine.
Yeah, it's been a wild year. So we wanted to talk about this Texas Supreme Court case against Pennsylvania, and we wanted to talk a little bit about Ken Paxton, but I want to start off with that Supreme Court case. And you had posted, whenever it came up, you had posted on Facebook, like, please tell me y'all see the con in this. And so what were you alluding to in there?
Well, first of all, I think your listeners are entitled to know that I ran against Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton as a Libertarian candidate in 2018. And so before they listen and decide how much... I have an extremely low opinion of the current Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton. I mean, he's under indictment, for Christ's sakes, in Collin County, Texas, which, for those people who don't know, Collin County is an affluent suburb north of Dallas. And before he became the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton was and this is public record, by the way, it's in the indictment. He is a lawyer, and he was representing people as a company called spelled Servergy, Servergy, I guess it's pronounced. That Ken Paxton was part of an investment group, and he was telling his investment group, "Hey, y'all really need to invest in this company. It's a great company. It's wonderful and all that." Well, he didn't tell the people. It's kind of like he was working for the company, and he did not disclose the fact that he was really encouraging all these people to invest in this company that he worked for. And so they filed the Securities and Exchange Commission complaint, as well as an indictment in Collin County for felony offense. And I had a real problem with the fact that the Attorney General, who's supposed to be the top law enforcement person in the state of Texas, is behaving this way. So I reached out to some of my contacts. I was involved in local Republican Party politics in Kaufman County, which is southeast of Dallas. And I'm like, hey, who's going to run against Ken Paxton? And I was told nobody, that the word had came down from the Republican Party of Texas that basically it was going to be political suicide to run against Ken Paxton. And I'm like, you people have got to be kidding me, right? And I'm like, nope. So I had a friend of mine who was involved in the Libertarian Party, and I was like, hey, it's really a shame you Libertarians can't come up with a legitimate candidate to run against this guy. And he looked at me and was kind of like, Michael, you're the best Libertarian lawyer that we know, so if you're not willing to step up and do it, you really have no right to complain. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I stepped up and ran against Ken Paxton as a Libertarian candidate. I got 2% of the vote. A lot of Republicans told me, Michael, we could not say so publicly, but just so you know, privately, when we got in the voting booth, we voted for you instead of Ken Paxton. So he's a real con artist. I don't mind saying that.
Yeah.
But like I said, your listeners can decide whether they want to listen to me or not. But yeah, I think he's a con artist. Also worth pointing out that when he first got into running for public office in 2003, like everybody else, he's required to disclose all his financial holdings and assets. He and his wife claimed assets in 2003 of $30,000. 11 years later, in 2014, Ken and Angela Paxton disclosed that they co-own 28 companies worth $3 million in assets. All right? He didn't make $3 million off the Attorney General's salary, okay?
Right.
Nobody's ever told me how Ken and Angela Paxton managed to acquire $3 million in 11 years. So something's going on there.
Right.
Now, most recently, the FBI subpoena really was not directly that we can prove related to the lawsuit that was filed, Texas versus Pennsylvania. Oh, by the way, it was Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Yes.
For some reason, they only listed it as Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I thought that was weird myself.
Well, I think that's because Pennsylvania was the main one that, if he didn't flip Pennsylvania, he didn't have a chance anyway. So I think that's kind of like that why they chose to make the name Pennsylvania. But yeah, it's like those particular 4 states listed in the lawsuit. But Ken Paxton was having ethical problems before this. Here about 6 months ago, people within his office had openly accused him of giving preferential treatment to one of his campaign donors as far as regarding the sale of property. I'm not clear on all the details about that, but there was an FBI investigation involved in that before this lawsuit came down.
Right.
And my understanding is that they were investigating somebody for security fraud. Big surprise. And when they did their investigation, that's when they found out, hey, this guy giving a lot of money to Ken Paxton. And so that had triggered that. But, so there is an FBI subpoena related to Ken Paxton. I have not read that subpoena, so I don't know what all they're after or looking into. But this guy's just a shady character. And what's kind of sad and ironic is, the state of Texas, we've gotten used to attorney generals that were state Supreme Court justices that then became attorney generals and then went to higher office. I mean, first John Cornyn was state Supreme Court justice who became Texas attorney general and then became senator of the United States. And then Greg Abbott, state Supreme Court justice, took John Cornyn's place as a state attorney general, of course, now as the governor. So it was kind of odd to begin with that Ken Paxton just suddenly just showed up. But he just really seems to have a talent for turning on the Tea Party crowd, telling them what they want to hear. And I hope it eventually catches up to him.
Yeah, and as somebody who's libertarian, I had kind of flirted with the Tea Party at one point in time, and there was really nothing about them that I didn't like, other than it wasn't really my crowd. It was a lot of boomers, a lot of older people, it really wasn't, anything that I found attractive to me. So I went to I think I went to one or two meetings, and then I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, this isn't my deal. So I just kind of walked away from it and didn't really pay much attention to it. And it makes me wonder, because I kind of look at Greg Abbott. He's okay on some things. He's pretty good on property and property rights and things like that. He gives lip service to cutting property taxes, but it never accumulates to the extent that he goes out there and says it will. He's made comments before in the past that you're not renting your property from the government, and therefore the property taxes should be as low as possible, which that sounds good, but I've never really paid any attention to Ken Paxton. I don't really know anything about him. It's just, I don't know, he never crossed my radar as anything outstanding. I haven't seen him as far as the way he's carrying out laws and using his position and for the public. At least it's never appeared to me that he was abusive in the legal structure, and so I guess I've just never really paid much attention to him. But I am aware, and you kind of raised my hunches on this, is every time that you came on the podcast, you would mention Ken Paxton. And, you would just kind of give a glancing blow, it's kind of weird being an attorney general when you're, under, investigation yourself. And I kind of okay.
It's not just an investigation. He has been fully indicted. There is a formal felony charge against him. Now, he used his connections in Collin County to basically, it's kind of hey, they had to appoint a special prosecutor, and then they just refused to pay the special prosecutors. So it's kind of special prosecutors hey, we can't move forward on this case until you pay us. Now, initially there was a Securities and Exchange complaint filed. And so the county commissioners in Collin County is kind of hey, we want to see what happens on this Securities and Exchange Commission complaint before we fund this special prosecutor's office. Well, the SEC gave them a pass. Why? I have no idea, but they did. But yet the county commissioners in Collin County, they're still refusing to fund the special prosecutors. So basically, it's kind of hey, y'all are using his political cronies are gaming the system to basically undermine his prosecution. And I also should point out that I have very good contacts in Kaufman County, Texas. And after I ran, two of the top prosecutors in the Kaufman County District Attorney's Office came to me and said, Michael, we really didn't want to say anything during the election. However, Ken Paxton also did that to somebody in Kaufman County too. And we very, very, very seriously thought about indicting him in Kaufman County for the same crime. And they told me the reason why they did not do that was because, in 2013, Kaufman County got a lot of notoriety because of a series of murders that took place, high-profile murders, which I could spend an hour talking about the 2013 Kaufman County murders. And they just felt like we could not put Kaufman County through another high-profile prosecution like that. So that's the reason why Kaufman County decided not to pursue the case against Ken Paxton. And another really odd incident that will give you some idea of the type of guy you're dealing with is that, and this is on videotape, this is absolutely classic, that Ken Paxton was behind another attorney going into the Collin County courthouse at the metal detectors, and this attorney in front of him pulls out all his like metal items, and he had like a $1,000 writing pen, like a really, really, really expensive writing pen, and he puts it to go through the metal detectors, and then he goes out, and the attorney in front of Ken Paxton forgets about it and leaves it at the metal detector just purely by accident. Ken Paxton sees this $1,000 pen, and he reaches over and grabs it and runs off with it, and he's on videotape. You can go on YouTube and see it do it. I mean, and that attorney came back to the bailiffs at the courthouse and kind of like, do you know what happened to my pen that I had? Go, yeah, we do. But I mean, you can go on YouTube and type in Ken Paxton steal $1,000 pen and see it.
Yeah,
that's the type of guy we're dealing with here.
Yeah, and so that's why there were so many questions, about what this lawsuit was all about. And I heard several people. I think CNN. I think I read an article that was from CNN where they were accusing him of angling to get a pardon from Trump, and that he never believed that filing this lawsuit was ever going to go anywhere. That this was just him placating Trump in order to get his legal issues taken care of. I have trouble, assigning intent to anybody without any evidence of the sort. I haven't heard him say anything about being pardoned. I know when he was on the Glenn Beck program the other day, and Glenn Beck asked him about the cases that were surrounding him, and he did a brilliant job of kind of parrying the blow and changing the subject altogether, basically saying these liberal Democrats can attack me all they want, but I'm fighting for justice and what's right, and that's what this lawsuit's about. So he didn't really address the problems or the legal challenges surrounding him. So yeah, but there's absolute reason to believe that this whole filing of this lawsuit was a big scam on his part, and he never believed it was going to go anywhere.
Well, first of all, when it comes to pardons, the President of the United States has unlimited power to pardon people for federal crimes. The President of the United States has absolutely no power to pardon somebody for state offenses. So even if Donald Trump does issue a pardon for Ken Paxton for what's going on with the FBI investigation, the special prosecutor can still move forward on the Texas case. So let's get that up front.
Right.
Also, as far as this lawsuit, I heard Ken Paxton talk about he was only interested in integrity, and it's kind of like, that's a bunch of bull. All right, he don't care anything about integrity. But I was initially right off the bat just kind of like, this makes no sense at all. It's kind of like, why does Donald Trump even want to do it this way? Because we're talking like first year law school. You have to have standing to file a lawsuit. And it's kind of like, how on earth can he claim that the state of Texas has standing to challenge the legitimacy of the way other states run their elections? Because the Constitution's pretty straightforward in saying that, states, one state doesn't have a right to tell another state how to run their elections. But then I got started investigating a little bit and doing some research, and I think the reason why they did it this way procedurally was to bypass the state courts and the lower federal courts, because it's a long-standing tradition that the U.S. Supreme Court has original jurisdiction in disputes between states.
Right.
So I believe that basically somebody in the Trump world got Ken Paxton to file this lawsuit on behalf of the state of Texas, challenging these four states, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, in order to get it directly in front of the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction to hear controversies between states.
Okay. Yeah.
That would make sense of why they would do it that way.
Yeah. Okay. So I had a couple of thoughts on this, and I'm not an attorney, obviously, so you can correct me if I'm wrong in any way. The I've the argument I heard put forward as to why the states or the state of Texas filed a lawsuit against Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Michigan was because it had nothing to do with Donald Trump. It had more to do with Mike Pence and being the head of the Senate, and so being that tie-breaking vote with the way that the Senate is lining up right now, and the potential of losing the Senate seats in Georgia. So they're interested in having that tiebreaker in the Senate more than they were interested in having Trump as president. And so, from what I understand, their argument for standing was that it was going to negatively affect the senators that Texas has in the United States Senate, and therefore Texas has the standing that their voters and their senators are being negatively affected by an election whose rules were changed in an unconstitutional manner. And so that brings you down to the lawsuit in Pennsylvania that was filed by Kelly. I can't remember his first name. It's Mike Kelly, I think was his name, and he actually won a seat in the House of Representatives, and he filed a lawsuit against Pennsylvania, saying that the laws for mail-in voting, the change of law was unconstitutional because they didn't amend the Constitution, and their laws specifically say that you can have absentee balloting, but it's only by request, that there is no universal mail-in voting, and that so they had to go out of the way and expand the laws in an unconstitutional way. And this was in 2019, so this was even before COVID. So this was the argument put forward, that the law was changed unconstitutionally, and when it was brought to their attention after the election, that's when they filed the lawsuit. And it appeared that Texas was playing off of the lower court's finding that on its merit they had a case. But when they went up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court kicked them out and said, no, you filed the lawsuit too late. So I think that's what Texas was trying to follow up on, and they were trying to use the Senate as their standing. I don't know. Apparently they really didn't have any ground to stand on, but that was kind of the angle. It appeared they were kind of trying to maneuver that in such a way.
Well, basically, the lawsuit, I read the motion, by the way. I read the pleadings. Okay. And it talked about that the fraud in the other states diluted their votes of their citizens. And first of all, I don't know anything about the election laws in Pennsylvania, by the way. It's not mine.
Right.
I'm not licensed or anything about that. So whether there was or was not fraud in Pennsylvania, I remember very, very well, first year law school, one of my professors, when he would talk about, when you made a factual argument, and he says, the best response you can possibly have, I'm going to give you the best response. He pulled out his chalk and he wrote in about 3-foot letters on the chalkboard, so what?
Right.
So basically, it's kind of like, basically the Supreme Court in basically a 2-sentence opinion basically told Ken Paxton, so what? I mean, even if everything you say is absolutely true of what went on in these 4 states, so what? You don't have legal standing to challenge that this whole thing about your votes were diluted. And like I said, I read the pleadings, and to me, it just was odd, because it's kind of like they said, well, we can't detect the fraud because the fraudulent actions of these officials effectively destroy the evidence. So basically, but we just believe there was fraud anyway.
Yeah.
Well, no, you have to have evidence. I mean, I know something about criminal law, Attorney General Ken Paxton. I can tell you that before you have somebody arrested, it's supposed to be filing of a probable cause affidavit, where somebody actually puts their name on the affidavit and swears under possible penalty of perjury. Is kind of like, hey, these are the facts that we're basing this arrest on. So I don't see how you can just say that, well, we believe there was fraud, yet the actions of these officials effectively destroyed it, so we can't prove it. That to me, that just doesn't even pass the smell test in my book.
Yeah, and this election was extremely strange in all honesty, and there are so many anomalies and irregularities going on around this election that I understand why people believe there was fraud. I mean, even just on its face, if get rid of everything else, the fact that at 10:30 at night, the four battleground states all suddenly said, okay, we're going to stop counting votes. All of them said, it was almost at the exact same time. I remember seeing that when they did it, and I'm like, what? What is this? This is weird. And I was like, okay, they're going to stop counting votes. And then everybody was like, okay, they stopped counting votes. They went to sleep, and then they woke up at 6 o'clock the next morning, and all the vote totals had changed. So it was really strange in just the presentation, whether there was fraud or not. There was a lot of strange activity going on for whatever reason, whether it was the whole mail-in voting thing caused all kinds of problems and issues that they didn't foresee, or whatever it was. It was an odd election, so I do understand people that say that. But yeah, you can't just assert something without proof, without evidence. If you ask me in my gut, do I think that there was some shady shit going on around this election? I say, yeah, probably. I don't know how much. I don't know to what extent. But yeah, I can see that. I mean, I heard people, Democrats and leftists, saying we have to win this election by any means necessary because Donald Trump is so horrible, cheating and this and that and the other, violence and, rioting and looting. All this is on the table because Donald Trump is that bad and we have to get rid of him. So are there some people that believe that took that forward, and made those steps? Probably at some point, but I don't know to what level, to what extent that occurred. And so all these assertions with no evidence, and then gathering that type of evidence, the type of evidence that you're trying to assert happened, is going to take months, if not years. You're not just going to come out like a week later and be like, yeah, okay, there's all this election fraud and we know it for a fact. That's just not the way accumulating evidence works. So even every time I see one of these stories, and I'm following, the stories that are coming out around this stuff, even when I see them, I'm just kind of like, okay, well, you're making a lot of baseless claims, and that's just not going to fly.
And that's the reason why I believe that they did this lawsuit by the state of Texas to sue these four states, specifically because that would make it a controversy between the states, quote unquote, to put it originally in the Supreme Court. And now, as far as the election itself, I mean, for whatever it's worth, I wrote Justin Amash for president. Okay, so it's not like I have any great,
yeah. I didn't vote. I have no dog in the fight.
Nor Trump.
Yeah.
But I mean, to me, the big thing is that Texas, in particular, they had it where they could count the mail-in, because I voted early.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the state of Texas, they were able to count the early votes and the mail-in votes before the day of the election. So they didn't have a problem counting votes on the actual day of election. Whereas my understanding is in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Georgia, a big problem, part of the problem that's the delays was they had it in the state law that they could not start counting the early vote and absentee vote till the actual day of election. So there was a big delay, and that's what I'm told. As far as that's what reason what led to the big delay in the voting is in the various states where they couldn't start counting the vote until the actual election day. And I think that would make sense. Now, were there, okay, I was just saying that, I don't know if you heard, but judges hate overturning elections. That's kind of like totally not what they want to do. Most judges, they want to be like Solomon in the Old Testament. They want to split the baby. They want to make both sides equally miserable. And so, like I said, judges really hate to overturn elections unless they pretty much have absolutely no option but to do it. So it doesn't surprise me that even the 3 justices that Donald Trump appointed to the bench, his own nominee, decided not to see the case.
Yeah. I didn't know. You have to. The voting is such a democracy. In voting, it's become such a sacred cow, such a kind of golden calf of most citizens, and what they're looking for in the country, and they look at it almost as virtuous. You have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, like relentless amounts of evidence. I mean, you're just going to have to overdo the evidentiary burden, and it just I didn't foresee that happening. Number one. Number two, I don't think there's anything you could have done to get both sides to agree on this election. I just think that the division in this country is just so far beyond gone. It's there's no getting these people to see the same reality, and the judges would have been seen as taking they're either going to be pawns to Donald Trump or they're going to be pawns to the deep state, and that's the way these two sides were going to see it, no matter what. And I don't think that. I think the judges it was a lose-lose for them, no matter what.
Oh yeah, that's. I mean, judges are used to kind of like everybody can't win here, and as one judge they told me, the only time he sees everybody leave happy is weddings and adoptions. And so it's just kind of like, if you become a judge, just accept the fact that the only time everybody's going to leave happily is when there's a wedding or an adoption. Okay, so it's just the way it is. And so yeah, the judges did not want to get involved in the election at all, and I think they've gone out of their way not to get involved in the election. And this stunt by Ken Paxton, kind of like one commentator said that it was a press release masquerading as a lawsuit, because I don't know if you had a chance to read the pleadings. It was just a whole lot of people felt like there was fraud.
Yeah.
And he goes this kind of like statistical thing that made absolutely no sense to me at all. It's kind of like, the probability of this happening was like 1 in 200 trillion or something like that. And I'm kind of like, why did you waste Texas taxpayer money on this? Like, So that, like I said, I was really kind of like scratching my head of, why on earth they just as a legal procedure, did it this way till I snapped on the fact that it was a means to hopefully get the argument directly in front of the Supreme Court. And I think they were hoping that the 3 justices that Trump appointed, plus at least one more, would say, okay, because they were hoping, because Thomas and Alito, those 2 justices said, well, we should consider the evidence. We're not saying the arguments are valid, but we should at least consider it. The arguments they made. The other Supreme Court justices said, no, we're just not even going to consider it.
Right.
So I think their original hope was they figured that the 3 justices appointed by Trump plus Thomas plus Alito, it was kind of like a Hail Mary pass to try to get the election overturned that way. And I think it was a desperation move from the start. And I believe Ken Paxton's got some kind of angle, because kind of like, if you think that Ken Paxton was doing this in the name of integrity, all I can say is don't take any stock advice from him, okay? So,
Yeah. And I can see that. I mean, I can see, and that's one thing. Like, you had these 126 representatives, the House of Representatives or whatever, that signed on with this lawsuit. You had 18 attorneys general get involved in one way, shape, or form, at least like co-signing on it, saying, yeah, we agree with Texas in this, and yada yada yada. A lot of that is political posturing. They want these Trump supporters. A lot of these Trump supporters were not politically active before Donald Trump. They didn't think that the system was working for them. Well, they are looking at this as a potential way to keep these, typically non-political Trump supporters, active in politics in their region or for their preferred races. And so that's got to be part of it. Some of it is a political calculation.
Exactly what it is. That I grew up in East Texas. I'm a carpenter's son, and Donald Trump has some kind of incredible appeal to white, rural, working class people. Damned if I can understand what it is, but that's he can totally energize that group of people, and they see that, and it's kind of like they're afraid. They want his voters, they don't want him. I think that's the bottom line. And so yeah, they want to do whatever they can to keep Donald Trump's voters, to not alienate his voters. But I think privately they'll tell you that they really don't like Donald Trump, don't respect Donald Trump, but kind of like they want his voters. So yeah, I think that's what this is about. Because kind of like a lot of these congressmen that signed on to intervene along with Texas Attorney General, they came from elections in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia. So it's kind of like, oh, so you're saying that the election that you just won, that puts you in Congress, you're signing on saying that election was fraudulent? Really? Like, what's wrong with this picture? So yeah, I think a lot of it is partisan politics, pandering to the political, the tribalism. It's a lot of it is pandering to the red tribe, as I call it.
Yeah, I don't know. Because I guess you could call it the red tribe, but Trump supporters are different than, the GOP or Republicans. Like, they really are. They're not conservatives by any stretch of the imagination, or for the majority of them aren't. They're just populists. They're just people that really felt like this system didn't work for them. And Donald Trump came through, and I think this is what a lot of people miss. Donald Trump came through and said, look, I know these people back behind the scenes and what they're doing and how they're propping up, corporations, and they're giving all their cronies and their lobbyists
backroom deals, and they're sending your jobs overseas to make them millions and millions of dollars while you're sitting here struggling at home. And I'm not going to put up with that shit. We're not going to do that on my watch. That's not the way we're going to operate. We're going to operate. I'm going to be governing for you and not for the billionaires and the crony elites. And I think that's what a lot of these carpenters and blue collar guys see in Donald Trump. It felt like, whether true or not, it felt like a guy that was at least trying to say, look, they've done forgot, the motor that makes this engine roar here in the United States, and they've found that using cheap labor overseas makes them more money, but they forget that y'all are the ones that make the country work, and they all make the country operate. And without you, then there's going to be a lot of hard times for them in the future. So I want to give you back the power. And I think that's what a lot of people saw in Donald Trump. No matter how realistic that idea was, no matter how economically unsound it was, that's what they heard. They heard a guy that said, I'm here for you. I'm not here for the big tycoons and lobbyists.
And they hated Hillary Clinton. I mean, let's be real. The 2016 presidential election, I think it wasn't so much the fact that Donald Trump won as it was Hillary Clinton lost. Because it's kind of like I heard on a Scott Horton interview, somebody said, what's the one thing that the anti-war progressives, libertarians, and evangelical Christians have in common? They all hate Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
I think there was definitely a, kind of like I call her trigger-happy Hillary. There was a lot of blowback that a lot of people, and I do believe that kind of the two-party system wanted it to be Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton. And I've heard reports that it was actually Bill and Hillary Clinton that played a major role in pushing Donald Trump to run for the Republican nomination, figuring that Hillary would have no trouble beating Donald Trump. It'd be a lot easier for Hillary to beat Donald Trump than to beat Jeb Bush.
Right. Well,
and it's kind of like, be careful what you ask for, buddy. You just got it. Okay. So
yeah.
I think 2016 was a rejection of Hillary Clinton. And I can definitely understand that.
Yeah, that could definitely be part of it. But I think, look at the crowds he attracted in these arenas. I mean, there was something there about Donald Trump that attracted, that these people loved. And I really believe it was the fact that he was pointing out, the cronyism and how the establishment operates. And then, you got to also think, you had this like most popular president ever in the history of the United States in Barack Obama, who had come out and basically said that these people were, bitter clingers, clinging to their guns and their religion, it was like basically talking shit to all these people. And, Donald Trump was like a middle finger to these guys,
Yeah, they're definitely, like that. I can understand why a lot of people felt like the system did not work for them anymore. That the corporate cronies of both parties did not represent the common, ordinary working people.
Right.
And I think there is a pretty sharp rural versus urban divide. And I think the Democrats have got a lot of problems that they need to address. And I think they pretty much united by the fact that they all hated Donald Trump with a purple passion. But now that they're getting Donald Trump out of the picture, I suspect that the Democrats are going to start a lot of infighting amongst themselves. So
yeah, I agree with that.
To let Joe Biden, but I have a feeling he's about to find that he's not going to be able to keep the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez crowd in line very much longer.
Yeah. Well, what do you make about? I heard that this Texas lawsuit is going to be presented to the Supreme Court again in a different way, and that Texas is going to be signed on to the lawsuit, but they're going to be having somebody else as the lead plaintiff, What do you make of that? Do you think if they find a way to get the court to say, okay, there is standing, do you think that there's anything in this lawsuit that is going to at least be interesting enough to the Supreme Court justices for them to sit down and look at this case?
No, I don't.
No.
First of all, obvious plaintiff should be Donald Trump. I mean, he filed a motion to intervene in Ken Paxton's lawsuit, but I think the Supreme Court. I mean, there's obviously there are going to be people in these 4 states that can claim. I think the Supreme Court, like to keep in mind, judges do not want to overturn elections.
Right.
I mean, let's start there. So the obvious way the Supreme Court is going to avoid it, it's like, well, you need to address those issues with the court system in Pennsylvania, the court system in Michigan, the court system in Georgia, and so forth, so forth. So that's going to be the obvious way that they're going to be getting out of it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's going to be their out. And so, like I says, I mean, the whole thing of making it a controversy between the states, I can give you the classic law school example, bar exam example, if you want me to, of why that's important. I mean, if you don't want me to, I won't go.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I spent some time when I was younger in Nevada, so I knew about this. But this is a classic bar exam question. When I was out in the state of Nevada, people in California wanted to dump their trash in Nevada because it was cheaper for them. It cost them a lot less money to dump trash in Nevada than the state of California. So the state of Nevada, being Nevada, and said that, well, you know what? Okay, but you got to pay us more money if you want to come dump your trash over in our state. Well, Californians being Californians is kind of like, oh, that is unfair, that's unjust. You're victimizing us by charging us more money to dump trash than people from the state of Nevada. So they took it immediately to the Supreme Court because there was this controversy between the state of Nevada and the state of California of whether the state of Nevada could charge California more money than it charged Nevada residents to dump trash. And the Supreme Court said that, well, under equal protection, no, Nevada, you can't charge Californians more money for dumping trash than you charge your residents in California. So California kind of like, yeah, na boo-boo, so forth. You can't charge us more money. Well, the state of Nevada says, well, fine. Well, now we're just going to ban you from dumping trash altogether. So they passed a law that's like, no, you can't dump trash you can't transport trash from California to Nevada under any circumstances. And California, being California, is kind of like, that's unfair, that's unjust, we're going to take you to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says, well, actually they can do that under health and safety codes. So that's the bar exam question that's going to probably live forever of, kind of like states can't require people to pay more money, but they can totally ban transporting trash. Yeah. So if it's a controversy between 2 states, another classic example is the border between Oklahoma and Texas is the Red River. Right. And like sometime in I think it was like the 1940s or 50s or something like that, the Red River changed its course, and so the controversy was as well, is the border going to continue to be where it was before the river changed course, or is it now where the new river is? Yeah. So basically, the Supreme Court, I think they ruled this kind of like, nope, the border is, the Red River, and if the Red River changes course, if Texas gains territory or Oklahoma gains territory because of the river change, tough luck. Yeah. All right? So if there's a controversy between states, it goes immediately to the Supreme Court to decide. And I think that's the reason why they filed it this way, in order to get it directly to the Supreme Court and bypass the state courts and the courts of appeal. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious about
Okay, because I know that the Supreme Court, when ruling on Gore versus Bush, they said that they did not want that to become precedent, and they didn't want it to be seen as precedent. But I know the Texas suit is actually trying to say that it is precedent, and then, but my real interest here is the constitutionality of the changing of the laws, and the mail-in balloting, and it was done prior to the coronavirus being a thing. The law was changed in Pennsylvania in October of 2019. So they can't use coronavirus as the reasoning behind why they changed the mail-in balloting. I'm just really curious as to, I would love to see whether or not, even if they didn't see the case, I would like to see the justification of the people that changed the law in knowing that originally they were trying to pass an amendment, and then they backed off and decided, no, we're not going to pass an amendment. We're just going to change the law.
Well, that can tell you that in Ken Paxton's pleadings that he filed, I mean, he did go through and talk about how it wasn't the state legislatures that made these changes. It was the government, and that was one of his arguments.
Right.
And I think for the citizens of those 4 states, I think they've got a legitimate reason to say that, hey, you know what, these changes that you made to the way elections are run was not lawful. I just don't think that the state of Texas has any right to go to other states and say, your elections were unlawful.
Right.
I go back to Professor Taubenfeld's "So what" on the blackboard.
Yeah.
Whether our elections are lawful or unlawful, Texas is really none of your business.
Right.
Okay. I don't want Louisiana to come in and tell Texans that their elections are unlawful either. So
yeah,
that's like I said. It was just a basic. Just don't have the standing to file it.
Right.
I don't see the Supreme Court changing its position.
Yeah, no, and again, like you said, the judges don't want to be in the position of trying to change a vote, or an election. That's just, they don't want to be the ones deciding an election, and so it's gotta, unless you got a severe amount of evidence, they're not going to do anything.
Well, people keep pointing to Bush versus Gore. I think most people today don't realize there was less than 600 votes in Florida that changed.
Right.
And like I said, I'm old enough. I'm about to turn 56, so I'm old enough to remember that presidential election pretty well. And so, I think that was a very, very unusual circumstance that it was just so close in that one state.
Yes.
And most people don't know this today, but the 1960 election between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon largely came down to the state of Illinois, and the Republicans dominated the southern part of Illinois, and the Democrats dominated the northern part of Illinois. And it's pretty blatantly clear that the political bosses in Chicago just basically stuffed the ballot box enough so that Kennedy won the 1960 election. And Richard Nixon, his response is, "I'll be back." He's kind of like, I'm not going to challenge the election because I'm young enough, and I'll be back.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the end of the technical difficulties for us. That is the abrupt ending I was telling you about. I hope that y'all enjoyed what we got out of that podcast, and I'll have Michael on again, as y'all are fully aware. So, sorry about the technical difficulties once again, but you know it. I'm Tommy Salmons. Late.